Hello, humane marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hi, Patty. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today about pricing. Welcome to the Humane Marketing Show.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so delighted. I want to give a shout out to Sophie Leschner, who's introduced us, and I couldn't be more happy with having this introduction, because I have to admit, like in terms of pricing, especially aligned with our values and humane marketing, it's not always easy to find the right experts. But when I came across your work, I'm like, oh yes, definitely very much aligned. So yeah, super delighted to have you here. I think I want to start off with one of the stories you tell on your website, and I think I heard you talk about it on another podcast as well, and it has to do with cookies. So it's not the cookie cutter story, the cookie cutter recipes that we talk about a lot in the humane marketing, kind of like follow everybody else's recipe for success, but it also has to do with cookies. So why don't you start us off there, Patty?
Sure. When I was growing up, my mom made these fabulous cookies. The whole house smelled good. It was warm. The cookies were gooey. And all my life, I watched my mom eat the broken cookies. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I even thought to ask her, why do you only eat the broken cookies? Do they taste better? And she laughed and said, no, I eat the broken cookies so you can have the whole ones. And that memory came rushing back to me several years ago when I was struggling to put words around a really pervasive pattern that I had seen in the decades that I've worked with women business owners. That's what we're doing as women. And that image of my mom eating the broken cookies popped in my head. I realized that we are watching our role models, our moms and our grandmothers, and they brought that spirit of self-sacrifice to everything they did. So we're following that, and we're bringing that into our businesses. And that's what I call the broken cookie effect. When we undervalue ourselves, we underprice our services, and then we overdeliver. So we struggle to be profitable. We really have a lot of limiting behaviors, because I believe everything in your business flows from your pricing. When you can hire, who you can hire, the technology that you bring into your company, all of the things that you spend money on, you can't do that, and you don't have those choices unless your pricing is appropriate and your company is profitable. And so what I've seen is that everyone around us, our clients, our staff, our families, everybody gets the whole cookie, and we live on crumbs.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite the story. And it's, I could think of at least 3 or 4 women in my personal life that I've seen kind of doing similar things. And then also, yes, in business, I think this definitely resonates. And I see that. Obviously I didn't know about the cookie story before, but to me, it's like this feminine energy. We're so good at certain things, the caretaking, the empathy. We're both HSPs as well, highly sensitive people, Patty. And so there's this, very nurturing care that we bring to our business, and the feminine energy. But on the other side of the coin, there's then also this broken cookie effect where we struggle to take care of ourselves, right?
Yes, and let
Definitely.
me add that the broken cookie effect is not about putting yourself first and everybody else last. That's against our nature. I mean,
Right.
talking exactly about what you're talking about in terms of our feminine energy and our need and ability to nurture. Those are all parts of who we are as humans. And I don't mean to minimize those or dismiss those at all, but there's a reason that you're in business. And it's a reason that there's a business instead of a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to make money. And
Right.
often we have to live on the money that we make from our businesses. So there's a real consequence if we're always putting ourselves last and so worried about taking care of everyone around us that we miss the idea that unless we take care of ourselves emotionally, logistically, being able to delegate, being able to put boundaries around what you're doing and saying, unless we're able to do that effectively, then there's such a high toll that it takes on us as a person.
Yeah, it's so true. And on the other hand, I see this kind of pattern where, especially in the conscious entrepreneur sphere, and I'm again specifically thinking of women, but it's probably all genders, who want to be affordable for everybody because we're conscious entrepreneurs, and so we need to be affordable for everybody. And then we apply low prices, and at the same time then burning out because we just can't be sustainable with these low prices. So so how do we, knowing all of that, how do we do it differently where it feels good to ourselves, but it also feels good for our clients, who, where we still want to respect that not everybody can maybe afford high level prices? What's your suggestion here?
So that was the question that was really ringing in my head. Was the phrase that I often hear from women business owners is, but if I raise my prices, it's not fair to my buyers. It's
Right.
not fair to my clients. So remember that you, as the business owner, have a lot of choices, and you get to set the stage for what you do and what you don't do. But sometimes we forget that and we think the client is the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes we've created a job for ourselves instead of building a business. So part of the work that I do is working with women that are further along in their journey and they want to start building real business value so that one day they can exit their company and sell it if they choose to. But one of the challenges is that when I talk to women business owners, especially those that are expertise based, they say, but I don't have anything to sell. And that is a real misunderstanding of value. So I'm going to go back to the original point about pricing. So the antidote to the broken cookie effect, how you can beat that, is with a 4-step system that I've developed called the SNAP system. And the reason there are 4 pieces, and it's not as simple as raising your prices, because if it were that simple, everybody would do that every year
Yeah.
and just call it a day, right? But it's not simple, exactly to your point. So the SNAP system stands for S, stop believing the myths. N, narrow your focus. A, assess your value. And P, practice your power. And this actually is the structure of my book, which is called Your Hidden Advantage. And that's a great place to start because not only will you learn the concepts around this, but also there are exercises. And when you go through those exercises, it will help you gain some clarity because a lot of the reason that we don't change our pricing or add structure to it is because we're afraid. And because sometimes we think, well, that's not fair. But remember, you have choices. So here's what I typically recommend is add structure to your pricing, build a pricing model. It makes you more confident because there's a rationale behind how you're pricing. And do that only with new clients and leave your current clients alone. You can change the pricing over time with your existing clients, but there's no big hurry. And your new clients won't really know the difference. So going back to the SNAP system, stop believing the myths. So those are all those limiting beliefs like pricing. I price based on what the market can bear. And that is, that's kind of my pet peeve because there's no such thing as what the market can bear, as long as you understand that there's a price point for every buyer. And we see that all the time. We see that in retail, right? There are different stores. You can buy a blouse in any of those stores, but which woman shops in which store depends on how much money she can spend and what she thinks is important. And your buyers come to you with that same mindset. So if you can build what I call the perceived value, the value in the mind of your buyer, then every step you take to build value helps your buyer understand your pricing, your compensation, and there isn't any pushback. Now, the important part of that is the N, narrow your focus, because that's about finding right fit clients, what I call ideal buyers. And a lot of times we're waiting for the phone to ring. We only have an inbound process. Sometimes we don't have a process at all. We're waiting for the phone to ring and then we're winging it, trying to figure out how do we convince this person to buy from us? And that approach does not work. Or if it works temporarily, all of a sudden it will stop working and you will be shocked and horrified that now what do you do? Your job as the business owner is not to convince anyone of anything. That's just not your role. Mm-hmm. If you provide an expertise, or if you provide any kind of service or even a product is a little bit easier because you have a supply chain and you can price your product partially based on the expenses of producing that product. With a service company, sometimes it feels like we pick a number out of thin air, and that doesn't feel good. So building a pricing model is really important, but the SNAP system is in that order for a reason, because the limiting thinking is your first issue. So I teach in my book, how do you shift the way you think? The second piece, narrow your focus, is about finding those buyers who understand the value you bring, and that means they also will understand your pricing model. And they're going to be such great clients because they already value you. And the assess your value is about building your pricing model. And I teach how to do that in the book as well. And the last piece is practice your power. That is all about communicating. And the huge challenge we have as women is that we're typically raised not to talk about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that if you talk about yourself, it's bragging. And that doesn't feel good. So I'm based in Houston, Texas, in the US. And we have a saying here in Texas that it's not bragging if it's true. And I grew up believing that we can talk about ourselves effectively without it feeling like it's bragging. So that is part of what I teach as well, is how do you communicate assertively and with confidence? And I teach very specific techniques to do that.
There's so much that you just shared in just a few minutes, and I want to unpack some of the things you mentioned. I think the first thing that really stood out, and I think it's super important to repeat, is you said apply new prices to new clients, keep your old prices for existing clients, and I think that is really unique advice, or maybe other people say it, but they don't say it often enough. because I feel like there's this message that everybody hears, oh, I need to always increase my prices. And then people go out and send out this email to all their clients saying my prices are now, this much. And then they start losing all their clients and they wonder what they did wrong. Well, what they did wrong is that the previous clients, they bought into the value that you sold them then, right? And so you really need to kind of communicate your new value first so that the new clients buy into this new value that you're selling. And I think that, yeah, that's key. And that's really what I'm doing right now with the Humane Marketing Circle as well. And I'm going to be very transparent about that. The existing clients, members, let's say, they bought in at a lower price, and it's normal that when you build a community, there's not that many members yet, not that much engagement, right? You could get in at a lower price, but now we have 60 members. There's now 4 calls per month. Well, the value has increased like by huge amounts. And so obviously I had to raise my price. And so the new members will, yes, they will get in at a higher price, but they also buy in at a higher value. And I think that's really important to understand, that you can't just expect. Now, if I would send out to all my existing members saying, oh, the price is now double, well, a few of them would probably say, well, okay, but that's too bad. I bought in at this rate. Now this won't work for me anymore. It's not that they don't value it. It's more just like they bought into it when it was a different price. And so they would be disappointed to see that the price now doubled. And I think that is so key to remember, to just not do that with existing clients either. So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that.
Yes. And think about it this way too. The people who bought in at the beginning took a risk.
Right. Yeah.
There could have been very little value. And I bet all of us have experienced that, where we've
Right.
gotten involved with a program and it turned out there really wasn't that much value to it.
Right.
We took a risk spending our money and investing in something because we believed in the person doing it, or we thought there was going to be a lot of value. So not only did we take a risk, but we've remained loyal.
Right.
We've remained a member because we're happy to help that grow.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And we've all had that experience. So I think there should be some reward for that, taking a risk and being loyal and helping build the membership.
Exactly. Yeah.
And because of that, keeping the legacy prices makes sense to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. The other things you mentioned in your SNAP system, so the first one, yeah, is it's basically the mindset piece, right? How do you stop believing some of these myths around pricing? And it's so important that everything you do starts with the mindset shift. And I'm so glad you talk about that too. And then just like in marketing or branding as well, like anything we do online, well, we need to be very clear who we are talking to. And so it seems like it's the same thing for our prices. The one question I have, and I guess it's the same in marketing, can we have different ideal clients? And if so, will the prices be different?
Possibly. So yes, I think what you're describing is clients who want different services.
It could be different. It could be different services. It could be different. It could be the same service, but different levels of access, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you can customize that. So that is the power of the pricing model.
Right.
Because you could use one pricing model with different levels.
Right.
And so I have 2 parts to my audience. One are those that are earlier in their journey. They're very focused on growth. And that's really who I wrote the book for. Mm-hmm. The other part of my audience are women that are further along in their journey and want a position for exit. Right. So there is a difference in it's the same pricing model that I use, but there's a difference because there's a difference in complexity
Right.
in terms of how I'm advising
Right.
those business owners. So yes, that works really well. You can also, and I give examples of this in the book, you can take a couple different pricing models and blend those together and use kind of a hybrid that works really well. And I can give you an example. I work with a lot of accountants, and many of them are outsourced chief financial officers.
Mm-hmm.
So they're advising other businesses about their financial strategies. And the base pricing model that we developed is a monthly fee for the advisory services. But almost 100% of the clients need some kind of project at the beginning. Let's say they need their bookkeeping cleaned up, or they need an audit, an informal audit done to figure out where they are financially. Sometimes things have gotten messed up with the previous bookkeeper. So they need that project at the beginning. So we have a scoping template that will help them do that, to figure out the pricing for that project, and then they go into the monthly fee. So that's a hybrid situation. And regardless of the dollar amount that you put on that model, the model stays the same.
Right.
And that is something, it's easier for your buyers to understand it. It's easier for you to talk about it, because all of a sudden, when you're talking about it, you're talking about the structure, and it's not personal. It's
Right.
not about you or your expertise or your staff. It's about the structure of the pricing, and your buyer will really understand that.
Right. So if I'm understanding this correctly, when you talk about the pricing model, that means it's specific to your business. And in the case of the outsourced CFO, it could take some done for you work and then kind of a retainer portion, right? And so it just depends on what kind of services you are delivering. And how it does, because I have a lot of coaches who are listening. Could you give me an idea of how this could work if you're mainly selling your coaching services? Could there be a done for you proportion to it? How could you come up with a creative pricing model?
So it would really depend on the services the coaches are offering. So most coaches, especially business coaches, are helping them with different aspects of their business. So that's why a monthly amount, perhaps it's paid at the beginning of every month, what I could call a retainer.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps that is a really good method. Now, the reason that people are afraid to do that is because they feel as though they might get taken advantage of. They're still thinking in hours.
Right.
And they're
Exactly.
thinking, right. They're thinking, well, what if my client calls me like 3 times a day and it's kind of driving me crazy and all this stuff, and I'm not really being compensated for that because I have this flat rate monthly fee. So that goes back to boundaries and setting expectations. So I believe that when we're talking about finding your ideal client, that's backwards, because you need to find an ideal buyer and help them be ready to buy so that you can then help them become an ideal client. That does not happen by accident. And it happens when you set and manage those expectations at the very beginning. Once they become a client and you draw those boundaries and you help them understand what's included and what is not included. And then if they need extra help, then you have the ability to go back to them and say, well, you'll recall that our setup is that this includes 2 meetings a month and emails. If you would like to add some meetings or calls, I have this piece that you can add on to it, and this is what it would cost. Again, structural, not personal.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it so much easier to go back to your client and say, I'm happy to help you, and here's what it will cost to add on this piece.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not your client is going to say yes depends on if they can afford it and if they value it and if you've shown them every step of the way the kind of value that you bring. So going back to what you said a few minutes ago about there is no cookie cutter solution, that is true of everything in your business, and most importantly, pricing. There is no cookie cutter answer, and you need to figure out what works in your business with the population that you want to work with. And right now, you may not have a population of ideal clients. You may feel as though you have to take everyone who comes to you in order to generate enough revenue. And that is a trap. It's a really unfortunate trap and a very common one. So if you will take a step back and really go out and find your ideal buyer, you have to define who that is and then go find them. And I give some strategies in the book. Once you do that, then you will notice a night and day difference, because then you're working with people that you're excited to work with. You get great results. They're willing to put in the work, and you're not just taking anyone who comes to you. And it makes that whole pricing conversation kind of a non-issue because everyone understands the value.
Yeah. Let's talk about this value, because I think that's one thing that is hugely important for pricing, right? So what are some strategies that you can share that would help listeners kind of communicate their value better? Because if we said it before, you can't just increase your prices. You need to, I think, first increase your confidence. So I guess to go back to the myths, right? That's where you need to stop and start working on your confidence and your mindset, and then also communicate your value in a different way. So what are some ways that you have seen with clients? How did they start to communicate their value differently?
One of the problems that we start with is that we think value is all about the results. It is largely about results, and you certainly want to get results, but I bet your audience is already getting good results. And I bet they pride themselves on that, because most of us are high achievers. And that's the problem with over delivering. Is it's such a slippery slope, because once you say, okay, I'll add that, I'm not going to charge you extra, I'll go ahead and add that service, where do you stop, right? And your client doesn't understand the value because you just gave it to them for free. So again, it's a trap. And then how do you say no in the future?
Right.
It becomes more and more difficult when you feel more and more afraid. So when you start things from the very beginning, it's really helpful. So some examples of how can you build value? Think about all the things. In fact, let me share an exercise that your audience can do today. And that is find an accountability partner, someone who knows you well, knows your business, you know them and their business, and you're about the same point in your journey. And you are going to write down everything of value that you think the other person provides for their clients, and they're going to do the same thing for you. Then you're going to exchange. And it's a really powerful exercise, because they will put things on your list that you would never have thought of. So when I did this exercise many, many years ago, the thing that surprised me most is that the first item on the list that I received was calm. And that I have a calming voice and a calming demeanor. I would never have put that on my list.
Yeah, because
right?
you just are the way you are, right? And so you
exactly
didn't know that about, well, maybe you knew it, but you didn't think it was a value because you just assumed everybody was like that.
That's exactly right. And then I went and tested the things on my list. And every time I would ask them, so what do you think of calm as one of the points of value? And every single person I talked to, clients and colleagues, they all said, oh, of course. Right. Absolutely. You have the most calming voice. And my clients would say, and I know if I call you and I'm completely freaked out about something, you're going to share a different perspective.
Mhm.
and it's going to calm me down,
Mhm.
and I'm going to be able to make better decisions.
Right.
So it's tremendously valuable, but I didn't recognize that.
Yeah.
So you will be surprised at what people put on your list. And that's why it's such a powerful exercise. Then once you get your list, go test it
Mhm.
and ask people in your circle. The other thing that we often overlook is our network. Your network, if you've spent time and energy building your network of people and contacts and those other experts, that is incredible value for your clients. And yet, just like being calm, we think, oh, but everybody has a network and everybody thinks, that's what you do in business. But I will tell you, if you can shortcut something for your clients by making an introduction to somebody that you already trust, that is a huge value.
Mhm.
So those kinds of things that we are not thinking of on a day-to-day basis will help build value. If
Mhm.
you have staff, even if they're contractors, they don't have to be employees, but anyone that helps you in your business, that is valuable to your clients, because anybody you have helping you means you get to focus on what you do best.
Mm.
And
That's
that
a good
helps your
point.
clients.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, it's the small things that, again, like you said, we don't think of, that are actually make the big difference. And and sometimes it's in, I talk in the Selling Like We're Human book, I talk about tangible value and intangible value. And so some of the things you just mentioned is intangible, right? Well, how does calming, that's going to help my inner garden, right? And so that's kind of intangible, where some of the tangible value is maybe something that is really easy for you. For example, what's really easy for me is to write someone's LinkedIn profile. I've done that for 15 years, right? So it's really easy for me. For someone else, for my clients, that is a huge burden. And so they're like super appreciative of me adding this just as an add-on service, right? And so that's the kind of the done for you aspects that you can add, that then also kind of show this tangible value, where they can say, okay, check, this is now also off my plate. And there's not one that's better than the other. I feel like tangible and intangible, they are equal, in especially in the times we are now. Like serenity, calm, focus, all of these things are so super valuable. So I'm really glad you brought those up, and what a great exercise, yeah, to do that with a friend who then brings out things that you didn't even know about, right? Yeah, wonderful.
Exactly.
What are some things, advice that you could give someone who's just starting out and is probably struggling still with this idea of determining fair pricing? Where would you tell them to start? It's probably definitely the, stop the myths. That's probably the first step. But then if we go into the more tangible things, where would you tell them to start?
Well, I've experienced exactly what you're describing, just starting out. So, in a former life, I had a business in political consulting and lobbying, and had that business for about 8 years. And the challenge that I experienced was that my revenue was tied to the election cycle in the US.
Mm.
So, I was on this roller coaster all the time, revenue ups and downs. So, that was really frustrating. And if there were resources to help me grow my business and solve those problems, I didn't know how to find those resources, and I didn't know who to trust. So that was really frustrating for me. I was a really good consultant, but I didn't know how to price and I didn't know how to sell. And when I went out to try and find programs and courses and figure all that out, and I took a lot of those, what I found is that primarily they were designed by men for men, and they weren't working for me. And when I started talking to my friends who were business owners, they said the same thing. Well, I tried that method and it didn't work for me either. And at first we think it's us. We think, oh, well, I just can't make that work. The problem is they're not understanding, those programs are not understanding the way women think, the way we operate, the way we struggle, how we're juggling a million things, including our families and our businesses and our personal needs and all of those things. And sometimes taking care of parents. And so I've been in that situation, and I really struggled when I was starting my business in political consulting. And that's why I started developing my own programs, because it's designed by a woman, by me, specifically for other women business owners. And that has worked really well. So I would say if you're just starting out, take advantage of the shortcuts that are available to you. Don't struggle for as many years as I did. I wish someone had been able to provide some relief for me, but I had to figure it out myself. And so what I would recommend is read Your Hidden Advantage, because that is the recipe for the different steps that you can take with the SNAP system of how you can learn how to price, how to deal with your limiting beliefs, how to find the right people that you want to work with. And when I say right people for you, right? So you probably already know who you do want to work with and who you do not want to work with. You can start with who you don't want to work with, right? Sometimes that's easier. And rule out the people. So my guess is no one in your audience wants to work with somebody who is arrogant and mean.
Right. Definitely
Right?
not.
Okay. So if we eliminate all the arrogant, mean people, then you can start to pare back. Well, what's the opposite of that? Who do I really want to work with? I want to work with kind, giving, thoughtful, smart people. And then I start really creating a picture. So a colleague of mine asked me not too long ago, if I had to pick a fictional character as my ideal buyer, who would it be? And it only took me about 10 seconds to realize. Have you ever seen the show The X-Files?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dana Scully is my ideal buyer.
Mm-hmm.
If she was a business owner, she would absolutely be my ideal buyer, because she's a high achieving, highly educated woman. She is devoted to her work. Sometimes she thinks her work is her hobby. And she takes responsibility. She makes good decisions. She believes in evidence-based science, but she's open to new ideas. That really describes my ideal buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can think of a fictional character in that way, that may help you determine who you really want to work with. Then you want to attract them in your messaging and how you talk about yourself, your value. And then you want to go out and find that person. And remember that even if you're selling into big companies, you're still selling to a person. It's still a human being.
Right.
And when I say selling, I don't mean convincing. I mean taking them on a sales journey so that they're ready to buy and they understand the value and they're excited to work with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I call it resonating. And so it's very similar, right? Because we're not pushing. It's just being present out there and resonating with the right clients so they come into your gentle sales path. And in the gentle sales path, there's no convincing, just like you mentioned. People, and I guess that's why I focus so heavily on marketing, because when you market the human way, you then almost don't need to sell anymore, because then it's just a human conversation that has to do with money, but there is no pushing kind of, it's not a unidirectional sales conversation where you're pushing something. So
Right.
like
And I believe, I believe the same thing. And again, that works so much better and more effectively for women.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was reflecting on this whole thing with with this feminine energy and the cookie story, like, because we have obviously male listeners as well. And I'm just actually curious to I would love to hear, if you're listening to this and you're in a male body, I would love to hear whether you see this happening as well in the business world. I'd be curious, because I see it even in like mastermind groups or small communities like that, where, we're very value aligned and the males are very much aligned also with the feminine energy. And yet I always feel like to them, it's just normal to be seen to take up space. And it's not the same for the women in the group, right? Even though the values are aligned, even though they're not, macho type guys who, but it just comes natural. And I think it's part of our history. It's just how we've kind of evolved over time, and always looking at our moms and the moms before that. And so it's really part of this story that we need to let go of.
There is. And also, if you keep in perspective the pressure that is put on the guys. So I have two brothers. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of pressure put on my brothers because they were expected to be breadwinners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I, as a woman, now, again, you can think of this as chauvinistic, but I wasn't expected to be a breadwinner.
Right.
I became a breadwinner, but I wasn't raised that way.
Right.
And I had to learn a lot of these skills, which I did with my political consulting business.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have to say, all of a sudden I was 35 years old, had 3 little kids at home, a thriving business, and a surprise divorce.
Mm.
And I was thrust into the situation of, all of a sudden, I'm now responsible because there was no financial support. So I'm responsible for raising my 3 children on my own with no emotional, logistical, or financial support.
Mm.
And that is why I closed my political consulting business and went to get a job. And part of that was because the lobbying required a lot of travel. And I knew that I needed to be home to stabilize things for the kids. At that time, my youngest was about 2, and he just turned 31. Mm. So I have raised my children myself, and I have helped them all get through college and graduate school and launch their careers. And now they're all 3 business owners.
Nice. Congratulations.
So, thank you. So, all the twists and turns that we experience in our lives, I wasn't raised to be a breadwinner. But I became that because I had to. Mm. And because of that, those skills that I learned over the course of my life, now I really can put them to work in teaching other women how to build your confidence. You have more power and choices than you realize. And again, part of that is how we're raised, and it's generational. So 30 or 40 years from now, maybe that won't be the case for women, but right now it is. And we are very influenced by previous generations and the role models that we grew up with.
Mm, yeah, let's hope it won't be like that anymore 30 years from now, or hopefully even less.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, this has been really interesting, and just a very great and deep conversation. Thank you so much, Patty. Please do mention your book again and where people can find you, your website, everything.
You bet. And thank you again for having me. This has been great. You can contact me through my website, theblockgroup.net. And if you're interested in the book, there are several bonuses that you can download for free that are companion pieces to the book, including a video training called The Value Equation. And the book is called Your Hidden Advantage, which you can find on Amazon. But if you go to yourhiddenadvantage.com, you can also access the bonuses.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. Thank you. I always ask one last question, Patty, and that is, what are you grateful for this week or today?
Well, I have a new grandson, and he made me a grandmother. So he's just turning 6 months old, And very sadly, my mom passed away about
Mm,
6 months ago. She died a month or two before he was born.
mm,
And it was very shocking because she wasn't ill and she was so happy. And my mom and I were very, very close. And in fact, the book is in many ways a tribute to my mom.
mm,
And there are stories about her. And as I was writing the book, and she was so excited for it to come out, and I would ask her, can I use this story? Can I use this photograph? And she was so excited
mm,
with all the pieces that I was adding to the book. And sadly, she passed away very suddenly.
mm.
And it turns out that my new grandson is named after her.
Oh,
So it's really a lovely tribute. And I'm so grateful that I'm grateful for my family, my children for sure, and for my new grandson.
yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, sorry for your mom's passing, but who knows, maybe
Thank you.
he really took her spirit and came back. Yes, it's wonderful. Thanks so
Yes.
much for spending time with me today. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.